Welcome back, everybody. Today we're doing a review of one scope but with two different reticles, so essentially two different scopes, and we have the two here. These are both primary arms 4x14 first focal plane reticle scope. So the first focal plane, we'll just get that out of the way for the new viewers out there and folks that really don't follow this stuff for a living. First focal plane, what that means is any of the increments, measurements, or ranging features of this scope are going to be correct at any magnification level. So these are 4x14, so whether you have it at 4 or whether you have it at 14 magnification, the ranging features of this reticle, these reticles I should say, will work. So that's certainly a pretty cool thing over some of the second focal plane scopes out there, at least for most situations. So not going to turn it into a second versus first focal plane debate. We might actually do that in a later video. But these two scopes are definitely great value scopes. The RGRID reticle one I think I've only had for about 6 months, but the HUD one I've had for, well, since it first came out, so probably 2 years, and have tons of rounds to it, easily thousands of rounds, and we've never had the slightest issue with it at all. It's a little bit beat up, but it's still going strong. So what we're going to do next is let the dogs take a look at these scopes like always, and then come back in, look at the features of them, and get into the reticles somewhat quickly, hopefully, and then at the end we'll let you know what we think of them overall. I'm going to get into some of the details on the scope, and we'll start out here on the back. We do have our eyepiece here that focuses. So what you're actually doing here is trying to focus the clarity of the reticle to your eye. You're not actually trying to, sort of focus on the target downrange. That's something important to point out, but it is adjustable, so that way those of you who have different levels of vision capability can adjust it to exactly how you see it the clearest, which is certainly nice. Moving on up, we do have our magnification adjustment ring, and you can see here it moves pretty smoothly. However, I will say it's sort of difficult, if you will, compared to some of the competitive options out there, and one thing that's going to do is sort of slow you down if you're trying to really crank it and dial it over. However, the benefit of it is it's going to generally stay in place if you're walking through the woods, hunting with it, or even if you have it in the back of your truck or something like that. It's going to stay where you leave it, so that's certainly good, but it does move smoothly, no doubt about that. So all the way out to 14 there, and then all the way back down to 4 on that setting. Moving on forward, we do have our illumination knob, and one thing I like about this scope over a lot of its competitors out there is that it actually has this off position between each setting. So right now it's off, there's no illumination on the reticle, and if I were to actually grab it and turn it to 5, now it's going to be quite bright because this goes from 1 to 5. There are no night vision settings for those of you guys that are looking into that, but I do like the fact that you can set it where you want it, turn it off, and then you only have to turn 1 to get it to the illumination setting that you want. That's certainly something nice. And of course, the entire scope doesn't illuminate, just sort of the center portion of it. That way it'll draw your eye into the reticle in a low or no light type conditions. On the left side of the scope, we do have our parallax adjustment. You can see there it goes from 15 yards all the way out to 1,000 yards, and then of course onto infinity like most scopes do. So that's certainly nice when you're zeroing it. If you just want to get it on paper at 50 or something like that, you set it there, and then of course zeroing it out at 100, and then when you're shooting out at distance, you can set it out to wherever it needs to be, so that way your parallax is not an issue when engaging those targets. And both the elevation and windage knobs are 1/10 mil clicks, so that's certainly nice. Gives you nice fine adjustments when getting your zero in there. Of course, with the reticles on both the RGRID and HUD, once you get your 100 meter zero, you really shouldn't have to mess with these turrets too much, because generally speaking, it's going to be designed so that way you get your zero, and then you're using the reticle to engage after that. But if you want to, you can. Yeah, you certainly can dial them in, particularly on the RGRID. It might make sense in certain circumstances to do so, although admittedly, most of the time I would use the grid. So they do have nice adjustments. If I quiet down, stop talking, you might be able to hear them. Very tactile and audible adjustments. So that's certainly nice. One thing that I should point out here is that the entire length of the scope is going to be 13 inches and the weight on both of these is going to be 24 ounces. So for a scope of this size, it's right about average, I'd say, in terms of weight. You'll see some lighter ones out there and you'll certainly see plenty of heavier ones. So those are really the basic specs on it. Of course, the objective lens out front here is 44 millimeters. I believe I already said that, but if I didn't, there you go. In terms of the reticle, we'll go over the HUD reticle first, and then we'll do the RGRID next. So basically what you see here on your screen is that this reticle, although it is a ballistic reticle, still has a mill-based system. So what you can see across the top is those ranging sticks, and we'll get into those here in just a second, are going to be 1 mil apart. So if you're used to using that for wind calls and stuff like that, you still have that built into there. So those are the mills on the top as well as going down the reticle, so you can see how it equates to your ballistic calculations there. Next, we'll get into the leads as well as the ranging. So over on the left and right side, you'll see those circles there, and what those circles correlate to is 10 inches at the given distance. So for instance, the top one's going to be at 300 yards, the second one's going to be at 400 yards, and so on, moving all the way down the line. So that's going to be 10 inches, and the reason it's 10 inches is that's generally going to be the size of someone's head if you're actually using it to range estimate. So if you can see their head, and it fits within that circle correctly, like we have here, I believe it's at the 400 meter one, that target there is going to fit inside that circle, so you know the target is approximately at 400 yards away. So that's the way that system works. And you'll also see here that we do have movement holds. So I've gotten into this before in several other videos, but in terms of doctrine, military doctrine, people move when they sprint at 8.6 miles per hour, and then of course you can see the different speeds all the way through the spectrum of how fast people move. So that's somebody moving with a weapon. So you can see all the way out there on the edge, we have the 8.6 little dot. So that way, if you have a moving target, that will help you engage them and at least hold out for their type of movement at that distance. So again, it's going to be correlated to the distance. That's why you see it sort of spread out as it goes down the reticle. So that's essentially how the leading works. And then we also have other auto ranging capabilities that you see here in this reticle. So a lot of reticles, you'll see someone is going to be range estimated to be 5'10", and then you go from there. However, a lot of times you don't get to see an actual person standing up. So this setup here is for the actual torso. So if you basically measure from someone's belt line to the top of their head, the average person is going to be approximately 36 inches. So that's how the lines on top work. Those lines that we talked about earlier that are 1 mil apart, that's how they work. So you can see this target here is going to be correlated to 400 yards away. So the 36 inches lines up there. In this example, of course, it's going to depend on the example. It correlates right there to the 4, so that person would be approximately 400 yards away. And then you can also see the different way that we can range them if they're actually looking at us. So depending on whom you ask and which military service you ask, the average person is going to be, for range estimation purposes, 18 or 19 inches across. So whether they be in the prone or whether they're standing there looking at you from the shoulder to the shoulder, that's the distance that you could range estimate them at. So those lines going down the middle at 4, 6, 8, and then 1,000 yards are going to be used to do so. So you're going to take that target and line it up with the stadia line there at 400, and if the distance shoulder to shoulder, outside of shoulder to shoulder lines up, then that person's at 400 yards. So that's how that system works. And then we also have wind holds moving on down. So what we have there is both full value wind and then also, sort of half value wind, not half value wind rather, but half of that wind. So it's 10 mile per hour is the outside dots, and then the inside dots are going to be 5 mile an hour, and both of those are full value winds, I should say, meaning that it's blowing directly across from you. So if you have, a 2.5 mile an hour wind at a given distance, that's what you're going to use to hold. It's going to be right in between the vertical line there and the 5 mile an hour dot. So that's all the different features that are built into this reticle. I'm sure there's probably some that I didn't mention, but trying to be quick with it here, and we'll just wrap it up there. That's the HUD reticle. We'll move on to the RGRID next. Here you see the full RGRID reticle. So it's got a lot of things going on, and we're going to try to break it down. So what we'll do here is to the left and right of the horseshoe there in the middle, you're going to see this breakdown. So what that is a breakdown by 0.10 mils, so 0.10 mils. So what that's good for is if you have to range estimate someone A lot of times if you have either 1 mil or even half mil um, stadia lines along your reticle, it's not enough to do a proper range estimation. And range estimation is huge if you're trying to actually hit what you're shooting at on your first shot, I should say. So the capability of those two lines on both the right and the left to use for added range estimation really is huge. And when you dial it up to 14 power, it gives you a lot of room in there in between to really measure it and measure it accurately. So that's how that system works there. That's for your range estimation. We also have some auto ranging features on the reticle as well. So what you see here is up there on the upper right portion of your reticle, you'll see again the 18-inch amount of distance that we talked about earlier. Again, a person shoulder to shoulder, and the same thing, you're going to frame the person either in the prone as they're looking at you, or if they're standing there looking at you in your direction. That's how you're going to range estimate them there on the left. And then over on the right, what those lines are is a person who's standing up. Again, we got into that. The average person in terms of doctrine is 5 foot 10 inches tall. And you can see basically if you put their feet right on the bottom line there and the top of their head lines up with, say, the 6, then they're 600 yards away. And that's how it works, going all the way from 400 yards out to 1,000 yards, I should say. In terms of the horseshoe in the middle, what that does there, of course, is gives you quick acquisition. That's the illuminated portion of the reticle, so that outer horseshoe is going to draw your eye right in there. And then in the middle, you have that chevron tip. The chevron tip is something I really like. I've talked about it in many videos and many different brands of optics. I tend to prefer that over a dot because theoretically anyway, you have infinitely small MOA to aim at. So, if you have a 1 MOA dot, for instance, you're limited to 1 MOA, but with a chevron tip, it's theoretically infinite in terms of the amount of precision that you can get out of that actual chevron tip. So the actual RGRID you see here, and then sort of how the RGRID works. So each one of those big hash lines is going to be 1 mil, and then the middle ones is going to be half a mil. So one thing that's nice about it is that the actual lines on the way down are marked. So some of the optics that employ similar type reticle setups are not marked. So that's kind of a kind of a bad thing. So what you're going to see here is, for this example, if you have a spotter or if in your head you're writing down, if you do your calculations and you write down in your notebook that you need to hold 4 mils down and 2 mils left for wind, that's how you're going to do it. And that 4 there on the line sort of helps you quickly estimate that. And some people may laugh at that and say, who can't count down 4? Well, I can tell you, when the pressure's on and you have an animal, for instance, that might run off at any time, or if in the case of combat, you have a person that may do the same, and speed is of the essence, it's nice to have those little numbers there to remind you where you're at. Now, of course, the reticle is designed, well, really it's a mil reticle, so you can do it however you wanted, but for range estimation, it's designed to be zeroed at 100 yards. And one thing that's important to note is that it has wind holds out pretty far. So people are thinking to themselves, well, if I'm zeroed at 100 yards, how am I ever going to use those wind holds out there when you see the 8 and the 0 and the 12? How am I ever going to use those? It's not realistic. Wind doesn't blow that hard. I agree. That's absolutely true. However, if you're familiar with the mil system, one thing that's really nice about this particular optic is that you could, if you want to shoot at a further distance, like you're using like a 338 Lapua or something like that, this scope absolutely can handle it. It's rated for it. So no issue there. And you can zero it at 1,000 yards and then use the mil system after that. So if you're zeroed at 1,000 yards, for instance, again with 338 Lapua, those wind holes will become very real as you're shooting out at 1,500 and 2,000 yards. So that's a nice feature built into the reticle. One thing I didn't cover is going to be glass clarity. So it's sort of hard to depict on camera what the glass quality is. You guys saw some shots with my phone basically looking through there, but that in no way depicts what you actually see in real life in terms of clarity. Let's just kind of say, in terms of clarity, these scopes are very good for the money. So what I mean by that is, for instance, I have Vortex scopes that are generally going to be in the $400 to $600 range in similar magnification, and the glass is similar quality to that in terms of clarity. So for the money, these scopes, of course, are coming in under $300, which is awesome. It's going to be right on par with, something like that. However, if you take a look at, for instance, the Primary Arms Platinum Series scopes, you're not going to get that kind of clarity here. You're just not. You sort of have to pay for that HD glass, and it's just sort of how it is. But for most folks' applications, it's going to work just fine, and the price point, of course, is awesome. So that's certainly a good thing. The price point, like we just talked about, under $300. That's awesome. And the reticles really, I think, are just awesome. I think Primary Arms may be some of the most innovative, if not the most innovative, in terms of designing these reticles of any company out there. Now, I know other companies have started to use their reticles, Trigicon primarily, and I think they're in the works to use other company, to license it out, I should say, to other companies as well. So that just sort of shows that from a small sort of budget optics company, they're going big time because this stuff works. It's proven to work. I've used these scopes out at distances all the way out to 800 meters, and the ranging features have been spot on every time. It's, again, for a sub $300 scope, that's just awesome. So that's pretty much it. I suppose which reticle you want depends on your experience level and what you expect to be doing with it, but they're both loaded with features, so definitely check them out. Of course, there'll be links in the video description below for both of these if you guys want to actually go and pick them up. But with a quality mount on a rifle, you're going to get a lot of real good enhanced capabilities out of it, probably more so than what you see in most other scopes in this price range. If you guys have any questions, by all means, you can post below in the comment section. You can also post over at my Facebook page as always. But thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for subscribing, and we hope to see you in the next video.